I'm Dr. Emery Petschauer, one of the members of the committee. We have three brilliant presentations for the day, and we also have brilliant food. I'm glad to see that some people have already partaken in the food. Please feel free during the presentations. If you'd like to walk over to the table and get more food, it's perfectly fine. You can just give me $5 afterwards. It's fine. I'm just kidding. It's all free. So we're glad everyone is here, and we will get started promptly. We have three presentations by four scholars across the school. Each of the presentations will be roughly 30 minutes, and then afterwards, if we have a couple minutes for questions, we will allow for that, but everyone is welcome to interact with the presenters as folks socialize afterwards. So I will turn it over to Dr. Tivis to introduce the first panel.
Okay, good afternoon, and again, thank you all for coming out this afternoon. First, we're going to have Dr. Lisa Hawley and Dr. Mike McDonald, and they're going to talk about the Graft Science Prevention Grant, and it's from an interdisciplinary perspective, so here they are.
Well, thank you very much. This is a wonderful opportunity to have a interchange, an exchange of ideas, and a little bit more of a discussion rather than a presentation about this grant that we were fortunate enough to receive recently, and some of the planned research that will grow out of the grant activities. I want to just take us back to the beginning of our presentation here, and Lisa will perhaps tell you who is involved. We have two colleagues that are not here that are from outside the school. So.
I think if you can do it, we did this grant within a 3-week period. So it's not something you want to model, but it was we'll talk a little bit about synchronicity, because it really came together. Several of us were interested after the suicide on campus a couple years back. This came along, it was passed to us by Scott Crable. There had already been a faculty learning community on critical incidences on campus, and Dalton Connolly and social work is involved in that. So we came together over the course of a couple weeks. There's 4 people that are considered PIs on the grant: Michael McDonald, myself, Dalton Connolly, who is in social work, and Patricia Wren in health sciences. And what's nice about that group is we bring education, health promotion, clinical mental health, and a passionate for education. So it's a really eclectic group as far as our different areas, but it's amazing once we sat down and talked to each other how similar our scholarly interests have been in different areas that we've tapped into. And we'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons of this as well. Let me tell you a little bit about the grant. This is from SAMHSA, and this is a federal agency that focuses on substance abuse and mental health issues. And this is the Garrett Lee Smith Campus Suicide Prevention Grant. And it's given to universities. There's also a tribal grant option for Native American communities as well. And the goal is really to educate, and our goal is to educate 20% of campus on suicide prevention. And one of the arguments, there's various arguments you have to make in this grant. One is that you work as an interdisciplinary team. The second is bridging infrastructures on campus that are already in existence that don't necessarily talk to each other. And so a big part of the grant was, for example, linking the counseling center downstairs with Graham Counseling Center, having student affairs talk with academic affairs, and different groups on campus to educate all faculty, staff, and students on campus on suicide prevention. The grant targets several populations: gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual students, veterans, ethnic minorities. We also spent a lot of time in our argument for the grant focusing on laid-off workers, underemployed populations, first-generation college students is also a large part. And then we also emphasize a lot the commuter aspect of our campus. We've oftentimes talked among faculty is sometimes students come, they sit in their cars before class, and then they walk in the building, do their class, and there's not that connection. So part of our arduous part of this grant is really touching on the commuter nature of our students and getting them more engaged on campus around mental health activities.
So when you look at the risk factors and the rate for suicide among college-age students or people in general, The college student is actually 7.5 per 100,000, actually half the rate of their age mates who are not in college. So there's sort of a protective factor. But within that, there are risks like the commuter student, the grad student, the med student, the student who's returning and under economic distress. So even within that population, there are some particular pockets that we want to pay attention to. So that's just for the completions. But for other range of self-destructive behavior, this grant's really intended to not only look at the actual suicide statistic, but also the range of suicidal behavior that leads up to that statistic. So it's a matter of going even perhaps larger than that and looking at health promotion, looking at building a community. That is a difficult community to build when it's a largely commuter campus. So that's some of the things. Those are some of the things that we're kind of reconciling and trying to get a handle on how to reach out and where to start. So to that end, right now we're at the cusp of starting our needs assessment, which you'll hear about. And part of that needs assessment will look at a range of stressors, concerns, symptoms, as well as experiences and interests in learning more about suicide prevention. And that'll drive up the specific nature of our interventions that you're going to hear about here in a moment. Okay, so Lisa mentioned 20% of campus, pretty ambitious. We're talking faculty, staff, and students. There is no one person who is important in this task. When I was a school counselor, it wasn't the case that a student would knock on my door and say, well, geez, you know, I'm in a bit of crisis here. Can you counsel me into or out of some sort of situation? What usually happened was a peer talked to another peer, and the peer talked to a teacher, and a teacher talked to me. And so we recognize that it's everybody's responsibility. And there's no one person that's key. So 20%, that includes everyone. Everyone who wants to learn about suicide prevention, to build the capacity within our community. And that includes our partners in the community, such as Macomb County representatives on the crisis, at the Crisis Center, Common Ground in Oakland County, and some other entities that serve our students when they're not here.
And we're also looking at 2 levels of training. One is, there's a lot of us that stick around year after year, and we don't transition out after 4 years, or 3 years, or 5 years, or 6 years, depending on the student population. So one of the layers of training is kind of train the trainer type training. So it's individuals on campus that you don't necessarily have to have a mental health background, but care about mental health issues, and leaders in student affairs, for example, residence life, athletics, the med school, obviously counseling, social work, psychology, some of the ed programs as well. And then the second layer is more just suicide awareness among the student population and faculty and staff, similar to modeling after the SAFE training that many of you have gone through. That's just basic information that if you have somebody in your life, or you know, a fellow student that is depressed, what do you say, or what do you do in those situations?
So in particular, some recent research 2 weeks ago or so came out where talked about student athletes who are injured and their life is turned upside down where they can no longer compete. High performance athletes, they've wrapped their whole existence into this. They're at particular risk for self-harm, for example. So working with athletics and being available to tailor some of the messages to the population of students and those who work with them is a real specific example of how we can meet particular needs of a group that might be at higher risk than, say, the general college population. So academic affairs, student affairs. This is really not something that is common. When you look at the other people that, other groups that have got the awards, they tend to be from student affairs, maybe a counseling center. We were adamant that we wanted this to be part of the curriculum, part of the culture, part of the services, and as professors involved, we felt that it needed to be research-based, research-driven, continually evaluated, and be able to integrate our scholarship, our teaching, and our service so that it lives beyond a grant. It's part of what the university does. It is everybody's business, as the famous quote by the person who founded suicidology, Ed Sneidman, said. And we firmly believe that. It has to be bigger than us four or this grant. 3 years goes by in a hurry. We wanted it to be embodied in what this university is about. So the combination of academic affairs and student affairs was very important and frankly quite unique.
Yeah, I think we're the only group that's faculty group that received the grant this time. So that leads to some some interesting theoretical discussions that we could probably spend less time on in our discussions, but the nice thing is we've really worked closely to get academic affairs and student affairs to support the match of the grant, and so they're working closely together with us. You know, one of the issues, for example, that came up when we were doing the exploratory aspect of the grant is the Oakland, the OUPD Grant Counseling Center. We all collected very different data on suicide attempts or feelings around suicide. So one of the first tasks, for example, is get all those groups together. And what type of data are you collecting? Is it similar to what Common Ground? Does Common Ground call us if a student calls them? You know, so that we can do follow-up. So there's a lot of different types of just basic data that we're not communicating about with one another that hopefully the grant will bridge that, as well as the educational.
You know, the underreporting of suicide, and certainly the even worse picture of underreporting and self-destructive behavior, doesn't allow us to really guide our interventions with any clarity, and it really hinders efforts to get this on the map as far as public health concern. Leading cause of death for those under 30. First or second, depending on how you classify various accidents. So even though the numbers might seem small, 7.5 per 100,000, it's a huge impact because for every one person who dies, there are 8 survivors left to mourn and deal with that. And that in itself places them at greater risk for self-harm by being bruised by suicide. So these factors just keep presenting challenges that we've taken on and we think are motivational because it's not an easy answer. It's a very, very nebulous area to study.
How we kind of came together, you know, one of the things that I want to jump down to the last part because I think it was really important. None of us had really worked together on anything, and knowing people's areas of interest and study. I mean, that's why today's important doing the academic forums because I had not worked with Mike. You hadn't worked with me. We just knew of each other, and I knew he was a suicidologist. Okay, so I knew that was in his background. I knew he had some counseling background. But at least I knew that because I stepped out of my office, I walked down the hall, I talked to people. And so I think that's really important. I've served on committees with both Patricia and Dalton in different capacities and knew they had a really strong interest in this. And so I think stepping out of your office, talking to your colleagues about different things that are going on are really important. Also, we, like I mentioned before, have a lot of interest and passion based on the experience on campus, but also the post-experience, which is what people didn't know how to talk about it. Administrators didn't know how to talk about it. We had some, Mike noticed, for example, in some press that the language around suicide was not appropriate. So we wanted to fix it, and we wanted to do something about it. If you pull up, for example, the university crisis plan, it's very thin, okay, as far as what you do. So we really just wanted to leave OU a better place around some of these issues. Also, as a side, we have a lot of interest in collecting some mental health data. Just across campus, drinking and alcohol consumption in some of those areas. So it tied nicely to our different areas of health prevention and mental health issues. So that's something that really brought us together. We also get along, and that's luck. You know, I mean, because we didn't know each other very well. The fact that so far, I haven't seen the shoe drop yet. We're working very well together, but I think also we're pretty good communicators. And if something's not working out, we communicate, and the work has been spread out very evenly, which I think anytime you do interdisciplinary work, obviously that's a basic must, guiding principle I think you must have.
And then we were having so much fun, we decided that we needed to expand the group. And certainly we welcome all to participate, certainly at the in the training and working with us and bringing any concerns forward. In fact, we learned something we're going to talk about in a moment. But we were required as part of the grant to get a project manager hired. So we've been fortunate to just hire Erica Wallace of Georgia Southern University, a recent graduate in the health promotion master's program. So you'll see a new person who has a wonderful Southern accent wandering around in her. The thing that she said to us was, do I have to change my accent? It's like, no, it sounds melodic, inviting, and she'll be helping with presentations and all these many reporting features that aren't as much fun as the other parts of this grant.
And she also has a lot of health education experience at her previous courses.
So we're looking at a social ecological model, we're looking at an educational focus where we position this initiative such that it's not ours, it's all of ours. You know, so people feel comfortable, capable, knowledgeable, and feel that it's a part of who they are to be involved in suicide prevention, rather than it being some sort of one-time event. It really has to be about changing the expectations about what kinds of services and response you can get from your colleagues, from your friends, from your classmates, when you do express a concern. So very specifically in the research, from the research end of it, we know that although I mentioned the rates earlier, impulsivity that's related to alcohol use, for example, adolescent population, 20s are considered adolescent, sorry. Even addressing some of those larger health and systemic wellness issues, we want to leave this place a better place as a result of the data we gather and the implications for services that go beyond the prevention of self-harm.
And the other large component of the grant, besides the training, is a web presence. And so if you look at some of the other universities that received the grant, a big part of the grant is also a web presence, a clearinghouse for mental health information, smooth connections between counseling centers on campus, basic mental health information, faculty pages, what do you do if a student, is overwhelmed. And also, obviously, the young adults that are entering college now, technology is, the best way to receive information. Also, we'll be targeting a lot of educational brochures and information focused on specific at-risk groups that we have on campus.
So our approach, starting from the top, will involve the faculty learning community first and foremost. We've got that set up starting in January, I believe. And it takes a bit of a departure from the faculty learning community that we used as a placeholder last year, the one that Lisa alluded to with respect to crisis. That was more of a crisis response thing, like in Tornado or something, but we felt that it was at least a starting point. We've now developed our own through written submission that Dalton Connolly put together, and so we'll have a dedicated faculty learning community that's centered around suicide and self-destructive behavior, and it'll be comprised of faculty and staff and our partners in the community.
And then I mentioned the Virtual Education Center will be a part of it. You'll also be seeing a lot, especially in the winter, beginning in the winter, suicide prevention workshops for faculty, students, and staff. Also, we're going to have some invitations to parents of students. Again, tapping on that commuter mentality. Many of our students work multiple jobs and are living at home, and some of the stresses that might come along with that. And then we talked about specialized training for identified caregivers. There'll be 2 levels of training. And some of this will be provided by SPRC, as well as once we get the specific training, we'll be doing a lot of training as well. But we hope to also engage a lot of our interns in social work and counseling and education. They have an interest in becoming a trainer as well. It fits nicely with those student groups. And then one of the things that I think we all want to remain scholars first in this enterprise, which is very different than some of the other grantees. So we're always interested in, can we make a presentation out of this? Can we get a publication out of this? And so that's something that is also an element of the grant that you'll be seeing, more internally from different activities that we're doing. For example, one of the things that you'll be hearing about in January specifically, if not before then, is we're going to ask you to do a survey, which touches on suicide prevention, mental health issues, and physical health issues as a way of developing a database that isn't currently existent on campus. But a lot of campuses do it through the youth. CDC does a similar type of instrument. And so one of the things that we want to do is really get a barometer of what are the different mental health and different issues of concern that not only are on campus broadly, but might be happening with the targeted groups that we're also looking at. So that's something that will be coming pretty soon. We're doing IRB now, so we're finishing that process.
Yeah, so risk factors, protective factors. We're instituting protective factors by presenting educational program and also linking with community resources and talking to one another. Some risk factors are modifiable, some are not. But if you're aware of them, you can shape your interventions. So risk and protective factors, we're paying attention to those, and the broader needs that interrelate with these issues that put people at risk for self-harm. So that's where we're at now. We didn't want to just, here's the program, let's do it. We felt really adamant about knowing our group here. We can read all we want in terms of the literature on this. We have done a lot of research, literature review piece of it. Now we want to know specifically how does that play out here in Oakland County and Macomb County and with our students and our community, our school community. And if there's something unique we need, we'll be able to adjust to it. So we wanted to make sure that we remain true to what our needs were rather than just think we can presuppose that.
Mike, I'm wondering, anecdotally, it seems that murder-suicide is on the rise, especially among men, possibly white men. How do you categorize that phenomenon? Because that goes beyond, obviously, the taking of one's life. It's not combining murder with suicide. What's going on there? Are there different symptoms for people at risk for murder-suicide? Or
Well, there's also, you're talking too about gender component.
Right.
I mean, who's more likely to attempt suicide versus actually complete suicide. And so one of the things we are looking at is gender, but you're also talking about violence component that is
Right.
external, you know.
Yeah, that's quite rare, fortunately, but it has been reaching the news. Toledo a couple days ago.
well, it's going to where my son went to school. That one case, I think the person might have been in Oakland, one of them, the teachers, the French teacher, whose husband, basically hunted her down and shot her.
So we're really hoping that this needs an assessment and paying attention to the risk factors and building in protective factors can hopefully catch some of these outlying situations that are even more distinct than self-destructive behavior and suicide in particular. Notice we're avoiding the word commit. We want to eliminate the word commit for all kinds of reasons. It doesn't provide a great willingness to, it creates a barrier because the word commit is really about against the law, a religious belief or a legal kind of wrong. In the Bible, for example, there are 7 references to suicide, and at not one point is it unforgivable. So we want to avoid the word commit at all costs, because that does create, however unconscious, a barrier to actually wanting to think about it as something that we have to treat as a social and a health concern, rather than a wrong or a right. So the word commit is just an example of how we're trying to say died by suicide versus commit. So little things that change the kind of conversation in our community that position us to be more apt to reach out and listen and not create a barrier or a stigma around talking about one's health concerns. So I hope that cases that are as extreme as murder-suicide or death by cop or some other violent means, I hope we can address some of the kind of factors, the impulsivity, the alcohol abuse, etc., the stressors relating to economic or
Did you read the
academic.
one a couple days ago when the guy goes into the police office, 64-year-old man has a disease? Is that another category of suicide where you're goaded and the person is killing you, or how do you classify?
Yeah,
Suicide
yeah, it's the
by
murder
cop.
suicide. It's the death by cop kind of thing.
Okay.
Oftentimes suicidal people are ambivalent. They're unsure. They're trying to ethos and bentos, life and death. And the short window of time that we have in getting people to help, it's really important. It's a very critical period when you're trying to choose, and when you're putting that out for someone else to decide for you in a violent instance like that. It is a tough thing, not only for, obviously, for all involved, including the person who's been asked to basically take over that action for the person. So there is an ambivalence in all suicide, and in some instances people ask for someone else to kind of help them make a decision in a very violent way. What we're asking for here is for you to help make the decision of life, reasons for living, reasons for dying, and help all those in our midst identify the reasons for living without stigmatizing the very raising of the issue that you are contemplating.
And I think, you know, the other side is we're also working with a lot of side issues that are those risk factors. So alcohol and drug use, depression, anxiety. And so those are lifelong skills that, you know, I mean, I think Mike said early in one of our grant meetings was it's like finding a needle in a haystack. I mean, you sometimes are not going to find the one person that's actually going to act on it. But you can do so many of these prevention-oriented mental health services and mental health type of education so that it doesn't get to that point. And that's really the ultimate goal of the suicide prevention grant.
So we're trying to do some broad-based programming that affects all, and for the betterment of all across the mental health spectrum, not only with respect to suicide and self-destructive behavior. But also there will be some indicated interventions. So we mentioned that the Applied Management of Suicide Risk AMSR training through the Suicide Prevention Resource Center will be provided as part of the grant costs to our community partners and identified caregivers, someone like Ashley or people that are directly working with those in crisis. And if you deem yourself to be in that situation, we will be providing day-long training that is provided through this grant, through Washington and the training center, to get a sort of a more concentrated effort to work with those that are extreme risk for the kinds of mental health issues that you mentioned. So we're trying to look at indicated interventions and more broad-based interventions and kind of affect change across the spectrum. So to that end, we're going to be looking at some data throughout the grant, every step of the way, data. We are obligated to make all kinds of submissions to cross-site evaluations so the other grantees can share and learn from our work, and vice versa. We're also obligated to send reports to funding agency as well. And we've taken upon ourselves to do even more evaluative work because we anticipate research coming from this. So we're hoping that we can sustain this through being responsive and accurate and let the research provide a basis for our decision making rather than taking some program that's on a shelf and just throwing it into here and hoping it works.
And really the hope is, I mean, we really have had a lot of support from Mary Beth Snyder and Susan Aubrey. I mean, we do owe them because there is a significant match involved too. And so far the time's just coming out of our time, but they had to support a lot of IT and other types of support. And so the long-term goal is after the 3 years that there is that continual virtual website. There's continual information. Similar to the SAFE program, it will be ongoing education. The infrastructures will be there to work on other issues that might be facing our campus in times of crisis as well. So we do have a lot of support from them, and that was really instrumental, I think. It not only, I mean, was it less in getting the grant, but more putting into implementing different aspects of the grant.
So that's kind of an overview of the activities, those 4 activities, largely educational in focus, but the backdrop of it is communication, cooperation, and looking at our responsibility to move beyond our building or even this campus, but to the world that we're relating with and to and in, and provide our students and all on campus actually with something they can take away to make the whole world a better place rather than just these counties that we're starting with.
And I think just kind of a last point too is if you look at a lot of universities now, the push is to interdisciplinary. And I think if we can model that too in a way that's helpful to the entire campus community, I think that's a real benefit. And we're actually enjoying it so far. Talk to us in 3 years, right? We're still enjoying it. But it's amazing how much connections you have, when you start sharing with each other.
Thank you.
This is very important work given the stressful times that we have, and it's also nice to see research resulting in social change and social action, and not just for self promotion at work. So that's a good thing.